I was wrong. I said that I didn't like Slog2, and I was wrong. I thought that I had a grasp on it, and I just thought kind of like, oh, it's 8-bit, it's this and that, it's blah, blah, blah. And yeah, while it is limited because of the 8-bit, it still looks really good when you actually expose it properly. What's kind of annoying is that I was using S-Log the default way that Sony like recommends you to use it, which is weird. And that's probably the worst way to use it. My buddy Joon, I was talking to him and I was just kind of like complaining about S-Log. And then he was like, dude, you should just do it the way that I do it. And he actually has a really good video, I'll link it up here, talking about how to properly expose Slog2 on your A7C. And he goes really into depth with it. And it's great. If you want to watch that, you should head over to his channel at Boy with a Camera. In this video, I'm actually just gonna like show you the workflow that I've kind of figured out since we talked about it. As much as I like HLG, you do get a lot of information in the shadows, but you have to really be careful with the highlights because you can easily blow them out. And when you like even slightly blow them out, they're really hard to recover. And even if you don't blow them out and you want to add some brightness to the image, they get blown out really quickly. Okay, so usually with S-Log, what Sony tries to tell you to do is they want you to get this number, this blinking 2 number, they want it to be at 2 but not flashing. The problem with that is that is such a narrow place to be. You can get to that +2, but then it's gonna start blinking immediately. As soon as any sort of brightness comes in, that +2 is gonna start blinking really fast. It's really hard just to stay on 2. Essentially what you wanna do with that +2 is just put a piece of tape over it so that you can't see it. But now I just realized I'm blocking all my settings, so I'm gonna take that tape off and I'm just not gonna trust it. We're gonna get into my settings. I'm just on PP2. First of all, what you want to do is just change over to Slog2, color mode to S-gamut3.cine. Saturation, some people have said to bump it up all the way to +32. I've just been keeping it at like around +18. Detail, let's keep the detail at -7. In-camera sharpening is not very good. You're gonna go over to your zebras. The zebras will pop in when you get to this number. With HLG, I've just been keeping it at 98 plus IRE, which means like at 98 and onwards, you will see zebras. But with this one, he told me to put it at 102. That seems to maintain really good highlights. The zebras are popping in because that is the brightest point of our image. You want to do that in every case scenario. You want to like crank up the ISO or the aperture to the point where you start to see zebras. And then all you got to do is just dial back until the zebras go away. That's pretty much all you have to do. Honestly, this has been kind of crazy because I've actually been able to go up to like 12,000 ISO and still have a clean image with good color. I'm just gonna show you really quickly like a 3 easy step process to get like a good base exposure and saturation that you can kind of work off of. Okay, so this is the image that we were just shooting where I was showing you like the exposure settings. Everything looks pretty even, everything's pretty flat because that's just S-Log. Let's just jump into the color. Okay, so this is the waveform. This guy is pretty much what you're gonna be looking at for the most part for overall exposure and everything. Nothing is peaking at the top or the bottom because we properly exposed it. We didn't even expose it to the +2, we just exposed it to the highlights so that they weren't overexposed. Also, what I'm finding with S-Log as well is the highlights, even if you overexpose a little bit, the roll-off is a lot nicer than HLG. It's a lot more forgiving. I'm gonna go Option S and I'm gonna add 2 more nodes, okay? So these are gonna be your base grading nodes. I used to put the main LUT at the beginning and then I would build on top of that. Or when you put your like conversion LUT, it takes log image and then converts it to Rec 709 and it makes it, you know, more contrasty and saturated and more like normal looking. It bakes that into it when you have it at the bottom. And then everything on top of that, it's a bit harder to grade because everything's already baked in. So if you add it to the very end here, and then you do your grades underneath it, it's a lot more natural looking and you maintain the color. You can actually get an S-Log to Rec 709 LUT from like a lot of different people. I know Sony has one on their site. Keep in mind, I am not a colorist, okay? This is just the workflow that I've kind of figured out and it seems to be working for me. So if I say anything wrong, I don't know. Everyone seems to do things differently with S-Log. So this is just my way of doing it, and I find it to be really easy, so I hope it's helpful. On this node over here, add your Slog conversion LUT. Boom, right there. So what it did was add some contrast and change the color space and add some saturation, blah, blah, blah. I'm just gonna rename that one to LUT. I'm gonna work backwards. So this guy, I'm gonna change that to white balance and saturation. And then this guy, I'm gonna change him to exposure, or you can name it primaries, whatever you want. From here, if you notice that everything's a little bit too saturated, you can always bring down the saturation. So you can go down to, say, I don't know, 45. We're gonna go right to the primaries, and we're gonna jump into the curves. Click these 3 dots right here, and then go editable splines. And what that allows you to do is like curve the curve really naturally and not have to add like multiple points. You can just click on one side, and then it gives you this guy so that you can kind of like curve it however you want. I'm gonna bring down the exposure. So I'm gonna take this guy right here, and I'm just going to drag him down till it's at about, the peak is at about like 896. So the peak is right here, and that is this windowsill, this window right here. Okay, so that's like the brightest part of our image. Crouton's having a drink. Here's what you're gonna do is you're gonna add the contrast and the shadows and everything. So I'm gonna take this guy, and if you notice, there's no information down here, and then all of a sudden it just kind of starts shooting up. I'm gonna take this dot, as you're dragging this guy down here, it's pulling down the black point. You don't wanna go beyond this point or it starts to get like way too dark. So I'm just gonna go right to about the edge of this line, and then I'm just gonna go back a little bit. So as you can see, I already have a pretty contrasty looking image. I'm gonna take this guy's line, and what you're gonna do is just pull that down just a little bit. If you wanna add less to the shadows, you can extend this guy, and then it brings down most of the image, or you can like retract this guy and then bring it down. So I'm just gonna go down like that. You notice your black point's really starting to peak down there. You can just pop this guy back. And if you want, you can just keep him, and you can keep him there. It doesn't really matter too much. It's up to you, really. It's your image. You can do whatever you want with it. Take this guy, and I just like to bring him down to a point that looks pretty natural, and I'm still maintaining the shadows. You still got lots of information in the shadows, and everything looks pretty clean. See, what I really like about it is that it's very even. The highlights are not overblowing the shadows, or the shadows are not way too deep. That's like literally all you need to do. From here, I'm gonna go to white balance and saturation. You can start playing around with the offset. You can add some magenta. You can kind of take away some magenta. When you use the zebras in that way, where you're like exposing for 102 IRE, and then just like you can like crank up the exposure to the point where it's about to overexpose. You're bringing back information into the shadows. And then from there, you can start adding on specific color changes, or you can add in your own LUT, and you can start playing around with that. So I just think that that's a good base to start off of with Slog2.
Don't wait for me, honey. Don't wait, 'cause I'm always heading your way, and I know exactly what I'm looking for. And as we go, I'll keep running till I can.
If you found this helpful, leave a comment, leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. I'm still figuring it out in my head. That's why it might be a little bit jumbled up and all over the place. Have a great day, and thanks for watching.